Hi viewers, welcome to at Newsworthy Publications. My name is Ben Gray. I'm a citizen journalist based in Bristol, where I'm dedicated to exposing egregious corruption within the Bristol High Court Judiciary, the Bristol CPS, and various officers from the Met Police and Avon and Somerset Constabulary. This particular documentary is entitled Mariah Breslin Covers Up Judge Adrian Fulford's Paedophile Connections. This surrounds a story that has been in the papers since about 2014 that reveals that Judge Adrian Fulford, who's a former senior High Court judge, formerly known as Lord Justice Adrian Fulford, has admitted to having connections when he was part of a civil liberties campaign group in the 1970s with an organization called PI, or Paedophile Information Exchange. PI was headed by a very unsavory character by the name of Tom O'Carroll. Tom O'Carroll was the head of PI, and he was campaigning, the organization PI itself was campaigning to lower the age of consent for children to engage in sexual activities under the age of 16, and for the free exchange of paedophile pornography to be exchanged between adults. So a deeply disgusting and highly revolting campaign group by any measure. He's since been convicted, Tom O'Carroll, for his paedophilic activities. But at the time, he was part of the sister or an affiliate campaign group very closely connected with Judge Adrian Fulford's civil liberties group. And there's no dispute that that took place. Um, I alerted, or attempted to, and of course, the story from the BBC about Judge Fulford's connections, which I'll go to in a bit more detail in a moment. But the key issue here is that with connections that we can see that Judge Adrian Fulford had and has had to apologise to some extent for having connections, but of course he's claimed memory loss. The famous brilliant memories of judges seems to have gone by the board in terms of Adrian Fulford recalling his connections to Tom O'Carroll, but connections there certainly were. And you would have thought that he was the last person that should be sitting on the bench at all, given his having to apologise for such connections. But in fact, he has been appointed by Yvette Cooper, or when Yvette Cooper was the Home Secretary, to investigate, to oversee the inquiry investigating the deeply evil child abuser Rudy Cabana, Axel Rudy Cabana. Um, and I would have thought that the Liverpool Echo would be interested in the fact that Adrian Fulford has these connections to a convicted paedophile and child abuser. Um, and of course, I'll look into a bit more detail of what Judge Fulford says about this in a moment. But I'll just first of all start with the emails I've sent to, along with a couple of phone calls to the Echo. The editor for the Liverpool Echo is Mariah Breslin, a photograph of which has come up on the screen from the beginning of this documentary. I first emailed the news desk. Let me just check the date here. Uh, well, unfortunately, the date hasn't come up, but I'll put the date on the screen when the video goes out. But a few weeks ago now, I contacted the Liverpool Echo with the following communication. FAO editor read Judge Adrian Fulford's close personal connections to convicted paedophile Tom O'Carroll, Ben Gray. Dear editor, I was wondering if you were aware that the man appointed to head the Southport Inquiry, Judge Adrian Fulford, has formally apologised for having close personal connections to convicted paedophile Tom O'Carroll. See link to BBC report. When Mr O'Carroll was leader of the paedophile campaign group, Paedophile Information Exchange, and Judge Fulford was aware of O'Carroll's campaigning to lower the age of consent to under 16 and permit the free distribution of child pornography. And I obviously provide a link to the story regarding Fulford's connections. The headline, Lord Justice Fulford backed paedophile campaign paper claims, the paper in question being the Daily Mail. I go on to point out or suggest surely such a man should not be sitting on any cases, much less connected to child abuse, and I'm concerned he was appointed by the Home Secretary for this very reason, i.e. to use as leverage. I look forward to any interest you may have in this information. Yours sincerely, Ben Gray. Well, of course, the point I'm making there, and in a moment I'll pull up the report about, um, uh, which isn't in dispute. Everybody would know that uh, Yvette Cooper appointed Judge Fulford to sit as head of the Southport Inquiry. And of course, we know that both these individuals are extreme lefties. We know that obviously from the campaign group that Fulford was involved with, the Council for Civil Liberties, I understand it was called, obviously a highly lefty organisation. And indeed, Judge Adrian Fulford can still be found on YouTube up to the present, because he's a very keen advocate for gay rights. He is very proud to boast that he's come out as a judge. He's one of the few judges to actually openly come out, and he's campaigning for more judges to come out and for the general acceptance of homosexuals within the judiciary. As I understand it, it is very poor and conduct and frowned on for judges to be involved in any kind of political campaigning at all, especially in an open public. They're supposed to leave all that behind, certainly when they stop being barristers. But Judge Fulford is still very much sitting pretty in terms of his regard to campaigning for his particular um, passions. But as I say, of all the High Court judges or senior judges that would be qualified to sit in the Southport Inquiry, it does seem very odd, doesn't it? It seems a very peculiar choice that a judge who has openly come out as having admitted to having connections to a paedophile Tom O'Carroll, having an affiliate organisation closely connected to his own campaign group that went by the name of Paedophile Information Exchange. And of course, that would mean that, and indeed, the story as goes, that there were, I think Harriet Harman was also connected very closely with the campaign group, or she was part of the campaign group for civil liberties alongside Judge Fulford. And then, of course, so then she too would have had the connection to Tom O'Carroll's organisation, Paedophile Information Exchange, given it was an affiliate organisation recognised by the Civil Liberties Campaign Group. So um, not only are they obviously politically aligned, that's obviously part of the course. We understand that Lord Justice Bean, of course, was a part of the Fabian Society, a strong lefty, and of course he was appointed to deal with the issue over housing migrants in Essex in the Bell Hotel. So, of course, we have a long list of judges who are crony judges, effectively, for a particular political side. And of course, there's no escaping from the fact that judges will have political views, and therefore it's unavoidable to some extent. But to go out of their way, as Yvette Cooper has done, to appoint a well-known judge who should be far more well known for the fact that he has admitted to having close political connections with a paedophile campaign group by the name of Pi, and indeed a convicted paedophile by the name of Tom O'Carroll. It would seem that that would mean that the authorities have the goods on him. They have something. The story. When we look at the story in a bit more detail in a moment, it goes a lot deeper than just mere connections, as I would suggest. He must be lying when he says, for instance, that he doesn't remember very much about it. That's a very common get out for people that know a lot more than they want to let on. And as I say, we'll go into a bit more detail of that, and it will suggest that there is a lot more to the story than simply passing connections that this judge had with Tom O'Carroll and Pi. Um, but of course, whatever those connections are, they would probably be secreted away amongst the ranks of the lefty brigade in currently in number 10. And I would suggest that he has been deliberately appointed so that Yvette Cooper and, of course, Keir Starmer can basically be puppeteers and influence the outcome. Uh, and just as they are influencing the outcome simply by appointing a glaringly inappropriate judge with paedophile connections to sit on a child abuse case. And of course, we know, don't we, from the stories that came out just after and then later on, to do with what the Home Secretary knew and what Keir Starmer knew about the goings on in terms of Axel Rudakabana, what information was reported and how it was reported, indeed in terms of his ethnicity and his previous dealings with the police and his being involved with the Prevent campaign, the Prevent group, and so forth. Um, so they are the ones who could come out very badly, because the Southport Inquiry is all to do with how come Axel Rudakabana, who was making all kinds of threats, who had turned up to school a year or two before with a knife, threatening to, saying he was going to stab people and so forth, that how he managed to slip through the net so easily is, of course, the focus of the inquiry. So who was to blame for all of that? Who was allegedly involved in cover up and lies to the public? Well, of course, it was Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer, and they are the ones who get to choose the judge who could paint them in a very poor light and potentially see them facing prosecution, depending on what Judge Adrian Fulford and his inquiry team come up with. So there is a lot of conflict of interest there, among other things. Um, and obviously, why appoint that particular judge when obviously the key point of this documentary and this report is to try and get into why Mariah Breslin and the journalistic staff at the Liverpool Echo are not interested in reporting the story or providing any feedback. And indeed, I tried to call them a couple of times. I spoke to a couple of journalists who didn't give their name, and since which time they've put my phone onto immediate voicemail so that they don't have to speak to me again. And just to confirm, I chased the email up, the previous email and the phone calls that I'd made to Mariah Breslin herself. She provided her personal email address. So I sent this further email, and the date will come up when I sent it on the screen because I haven't got it on this particular format. But just a very straightforward email. Re-evidence Judge Adrian Fulford, head of the Southport Inquiry, has close personal connections with paedophile Tom O'Carroll in the 1970s. Dear Miss Breslin, were you aware Adrian Fulford has admitted to being closely and personally connected to paedophile information exchange leader and convicted child abuser Tom O'Carroll? See link below. So why is he sitting on a child abuse case or any case? Perhaps you may wish to report this or on this. And then, of course, I provide the link to the story. No response, no acknowledgement, I don't even think. And here's obviously just to clarify the story. I think this is from the BBC as well, just indicating what the appointment of Judge Fulford. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has announced that the first phase of the Southport Inquiry will start today. The Home Secretary previously announced in January 2025 that an inquiry would be launched following the conviction of perpetrator of the 2024 Southport attack to examine what went wrong in this horrific case and how services should respond to fixated youth violence. Sir Adrian Fulford has been appointed as the chair following consultation with the victims and family of those killed or affected by the attacks, and plans to travel to meet them as a first priority. This follows the Prime Minister's commitment to leave no stone unturned in uncovering how this attack happened, and to not let any institution of the state deflect from their failure. Well, if that's the case, why have they chosen Judge Adrian Fulford? He has admitted to having close personal connections to the paedophile information exchange and the leader, convicted paedophile Tom O'Carroll. This isn't in dispute. Let's look at the story surrounding, from the Daily Mail, or BBC, referring to the story that was broken by the Daily Mail, which is as follows. Lord Justice Fulford backed paedophile campaign paper claims, the paper being the Daily Mail, published 9th of March 2014. Image there's a picture of Judge Fulford in a nice shiny white suit, no blood on his hands, of course. And of course, I'll come to my own personal connections to Judge Fulford in a moment. But here he is, and here's the brief introduction to the story. Lord Justice Fulford was named as the advisor to the Queen last year. A top judge campaigned to support a paedophile group that tried to legalise sex with children, a newspaper claims. The Mail on Sunday said Lord Justice Fulford was a founder member of a campaign to defend the paedophile information exchange, PI. The judge told the BBC he had no memory of this, but had in the 1970s been involved with the civil liberties group to which PI was affiliated. He said he had never supported PI and child abuse was wholly wrong. Well, that makes no sense at all. PI was known to be the organisation it was. It's like Black Lives Matter. The clue is in the title. It advocates and advocated, or sorry, thankfully no longer existent, but it was advocating the lowering of the age of consent below the age of 16 for sexual congress between uh, young people under 16 and the free exchange of child pornography between adults. This was more or less the be all and end all of what paedophile information exchange stood for. It has, as I pointed out, the word paedophile in its very title. And this organization, with Judge Adrian Fulford, I think then as a barrister, campaigning for their civil liberties group with an affiliate organization by the name of PI. How can it possibly be argued that he knew nothing about what they stood for, what they were about, that they were an affiliate organization, and so forth? He was aware that they were an affiliate organization. He chose to join an organization that was affiliated with another organization called PI. How can there not have been, therefore, a close and clearly some sort of tacit approval or support for PI? Otherwise, why would they have chosen to affiliate themselves with that organization? It is as plain as day. This judge was well aware of what they stood for and still himself stood on the platform as part of the civil liberties group that was affiliated with PI. Um, and why is there no further detail, no chase up, no more? Surely there's some paperwork related to the extent to which the organisation was affiliated, when it became affiliated. As I've mentioned, another lefty, Harriet Harman, and her husband had also strong connections both to the civil liberties campaign group that Judge Adrian Fulford was part of, and therefore with the affiliate organisation PI. There's no further revelation. And this judge, if I can find the story, I'll also put it up online as part of this documentary. And this judge, furthermore, had sat on a child abuse case where a teacher was found to have had paedophilic images on his screen, on his laptop, which also included the most horrendous child torture images and videos. He was given as a part of his punishment by the Crown Court, he was given a restraining order not to have any contact with children for the rest of his life. And that was reduced by Judge Adrian Fulford as the lead judge, sitting on a case as I say, within a few weeks of this revelation story coming about his connections to PI, saying it was unfair on the rights of that convicted paedophile to have a whole life ban on contact with children. It was reduced to 10 years. So we know which side this judge's bread is buttered. What on earth is a judge doing sitting on the bench where there's any shade, any potential connections to something as revolting and clearly criminal as the paedophile information exchange, and headed by a man who is now a convicted paedophile? There are surely other judges out there who don't have such connections, who would be amply qualified both to sit on the child abuse criminal appeal against sentence, and to sit on the um, Southport Inquiry. And of course, how do they work? How does the system work? We see it in terms of the way judges have no accountability, and the so-called free press, the mainstream media, and largely the social media as well, simply fall in line. They stay silent about things they should not be silent about. They don't investigate the things they should investigate, and they don't tell the people the whole truth and the facts. So what is the motive? Why would they not cover? Why would Maria Breslin and the other journalists at the Liverpool Echo take no interest in reporting the story to the people of Liverpool, who are the victims of these atrocities, and the general public, who of course are also the victims if Rudy Cabana wasn't stopped when he could have been years before, when there was a left-wing cover-up, when, of course, the lack of information or the improper information or the falsehoods led to the rioting and the outrage that was received after the atrocities committed in August 24. It's all cut from the same cloth, I would suggest. And of course, how did I come by Adrian Fulford's name myself? Well, as I mentioned, my whole campaign is to expose egregious corruption within the judiciary, which the press won't tell you, which I myself have been the victim of, continue to be the victim of, in terms of Bristol and London. And I came by Judge Fulford's name because I was convicted in Gloucester Crown Court in 2021 for allegedly, well, I was convicted for the allegation of assaulting various emergency workers, the emergency workers not being hospital staff or nurses or anything like that, but CID officers who had arrested me on alleged breach of the peace from Bristol Crown Court in November 2020. And I resisted the arrest, claiming that I had been falsely imprisoned, which I had been, and pointing out that I'd been the victim of multiple false imprisonments and assaults by the same constabulary, and I was entitled to defend myself against that abuse. And I also complained that I was repeatedly sexually assaulted during the process of my arrest. This began with an illegal body search, because the search under Section 32 of PACE can only take place if the person being arrested presents as being a serious danger to themselves or others. And of course, I wasn't. None of my conduct could have amounted to presenting in such a light any form of danger. And this involved my being searched by this man, Stuart Bale, who was the arresting CID officer, um, body searching me from head to toe, rubbing his hands all over my backside, my intimate areas of my body. I was then restrained a few minutes later, after I'd offered violence to resist the arrest, and I was restrained by various other CID officers, one of them who may have been also Stuart Bale, but I couldn't really tell in the fray, who had rubbed the genitals against my leg. I could distinctly feel my left thigh being rubbed with the bulge coming from the genitals belonging to one of the CID officers, almost certainly Stuart Bale, but I never got to the bottom of this. I then presented all this as evidence in my trial at Gloucester before a recorder, Robin Sellers, who is now being promoted, obviously, to a full Crown Court judge, to the circuit judge status. But at the time, he was a recorder appointed by a judge by the name of Ian Laurie, who was the resident judge there. And This judge refused to allow me to have representation. I pointed out that unless the case was transferred to the Western Circuit, I wouldn't off the Western Circuit where it was taking place. I couldn't have got a fair trial. The incident occurred between the initial altercation that I was arrested for in terms of the breach of the peace involved a security guard by the name of Henderson Ford, who was the manager at Bristol Crown Court at the time, security staff. And when I was tried at Gloucester Crown Court, which is just down the road from Bristol, where the jury were being sequestered, or the security for the jury, to keep them away from other parties and so forth, was conducted by Office Cleaning Services, which was the same company that Henderson Ford worked for, and indeed Henderson Ford had himself worked at Gloucester Crown Court or was connected to Gloucester Crown Court because his photograph was all over inside the court as the go-to officer to speak to about lost property. So a complete stitch up from start to finish. Obviously, I appealed my conviction. I got 18 months, including an 18th month sentence on its own right for calling the security guard Idi Amin and for allegedly, because I was accused of that being racist. Although no explanation was given as to why it was racist, other than the fact that Idi Amin was of colour and so was the security guard. But in any event, obviously I appealed it. I appealed the fact I was denied representation and all the other issues. You can go to my documentaries, Barbarian at the Gates, parts 1, 2, and 3, which is on the same YouTube channel, and that will show you far more details about the level of stitch up and the collusion between the police and the CPS and the courts in terms of the sexual assaults that were inflicted on me, along with the kidnapping itself. I appealed it. I couldn't get representation to help with the appeal, as I should have been entitled to, or even at beginning with advice on whether I should appeal. And who was appointed to this matter? It was retired Judge Adrian Fulford. He was the judge. Usually it goes before a Mr. or Mrs. or Miss Justice, not to a Lord Justice, because they are the very highest. The Lord Justices are, there's only a handful of those, and they oversee the conduct of all the lower courts, including Mr. and Mrs. Justice. So it's quite unusual for a Lord Justice or a Lady Justice, as the case may be, to consider the appeal on paper. They will obviously be involved in if you reissue the appeal or renew it, then it will go in front of a Lord Justice. But in any event, he was retired, and he retired certainly under a cloud because of all the revelations I've exposed you to in terms of his connections to paedophile information exchange and Tom O'Carroll. So I received, whilst I was in custody and had appealed my conviction, I received this response from Judge Fulford, and this is in case reference 2022 03725, and this is the part of the reasons the judge gave, or his response to my particular allegations in terms of police, CPS, and court collusion in the cover up and in the sexual assault cover up of, and therefore effectively in the sexual assaults that I alleged against the officers as part of my grounds for resisting the arrest. So this is number 3. The applicant had been sexually assaulted by the officers during his arrest and detention and had lied about these events. And the judge responded as follows. 8. This does not constitute a ground of appeal. The assertions relied on in this context were the focus of intensely disputed factual issues in the trial, which were extensively canvassed during the evidence, the applicant's submissions, and the summing up. It was for the jury to decide whether they could be sure of the testimony of the prosecution witnesses. I'll come back to that in a moment. But he also said, the judge went on to say the prosecution authorities failed properly to investigate the applicant's counter allegations of violence and sexual assault. These matters were fully investigated during the trial, and there is no substance in the suggestion that further steps should have been taken by the police or the CPS to ensure that the applicant's defence was properly presented to the jury. Nothing of relevance to the trial, brackets, as opposed to extreme, fanciful, and wholly unsubstantiated allegations, close brackets, has been identified by the applicant as to the investigations he suggests should have been conducted, but which the prosecuting authorities failed to undertake. See also points 13 below in this context. So, well, what's the judge doing now? He's accusing me in no uncertain terms of lying, i.e., committing perjury, both during my trial, because of course I would have referred to the complaints of sexual assault and the kidnapping as the very basis of my defence against the allegation of assaulting emergency workers and Henderson Ford himself. So I've lied repeatedly about all those allegations, including multiple sexual assaults, bearing in mind that everything was filmed from start to finish. I went into the court building carrying a GoPro, which was live, i.e., which was running as record. So all my interactions with Henderson Ford initially, and then then the police officers, CID Stuart Dale, and senior CID officer present Roger Doxey, My exchanges with them were recorded on sound audio footage, some of which was off because the camera wasn't pointed at them all the time because I put it down, but there was a sound recording throughout. And of course, we have the CCTV because I was in the main reception area of Bristol Crown Court. Sorry, not the main reception area, the reception area before you go through the main metal detectors and go into the court building proper. But all the CCTV covers all the area that I was in during the altercation and up to and including my arrest and body search. So if I've made all this up, first of all, I've lied about what the footage shows. And of course, the key point is, of course, the body search is only legal, first of all, if I've been lawfully arrested. And secondly, if I present evidence of that I'm a danger to myself or others. Now, the breach of the peace surrounded what I was accused of doing before even the officer turned up, because he was going on the allegations from Henderson Ford that I'd been racist and so forth. But of course, it's a very complicated area of law, breach of the peace, because it's all based on common law. So there's all different authorities going back decades as to what powers officers have to arrest if there's been a breach of the peace or if there's an imminent breach of the peace. And the officers couldn't even decide whether I was being arrested for a breach of the peace or an imminent breach of the peace. And of course, there's no examination of what was presented to the jury, my complaints that Judge Robin Sellers, or Recorder Robin Sellers as he was at the time, lied and misrepresented um, the breach of the peace authorities, the evidence from the officers justifying arrest, the conflicting evidence from the officers, the extent to which the officers' evidence conflicted with the camcorder footage and the CCTV footage. So all of that needed to have been examined by the reviewing judge, the appeal judge, um, in this case, Adrian Fulford. And he gives no indication whatsoever of what my complaints were about the legality of my arrest and the legality of my search thereafter. And of course, how could he dismiss my allegation that even if I was being lawfully arrested, I was still being sexually assaulted by one of the officers who were pressing their genitalia against my leg? Clearly could be felt pressing it with unnecessarily. I was already being restrained by several males. Of course, we'll have the photograph coming up. And I've also shown you the footage, or I will show you the footage of the body search carried out by Stuart Bale. But this judge, Judge Adrian Fulford, has not given any attention, any mention of the breach of the peace powers that I say were abused, of the CCTV. He's not looked at the footage of any of the footage, whether it's a CCTV, my body worn video footage, subsequent footage from another CID colleague of Stuart Bell, who then filmed my being detained and restrained outside the Crown Court on her mobile phone. Not one single scintilla or second of this footage has been looked at by this judge. He states about the evidence allegedly being extensively canvassed during the evidence. That's irrelevant because a judge has the power and indeed the duty to overturn a conviction if the decision of the jury was perverse. So it doesn't matter how, even if he was right and he's lying in his teeth about what happened in the court, only the transcripts of the proceedings can verify what occurred in the courtroom. And of course, no transcripts were sought by Judge Fulford, so he's just inventing because he's got no idea what's actually happened in the courtroom. This absolute outrageous lie that the evidence was properly canvassed. But judges have the discretion to quash convictions, even if the evidence has been thoroughly examined and even if the jury has been properly directed, because juries can be found to have made perverse decisions. There are decisions on the books, in the law books, about convictions that have been quashed because the juries have made perverse decisions in the teeth of evidence that clearly proved something to the contrary. I haven't got the authorities necessarily. I might have them to hand when the video goes out or the video is being made to go out. But in any event, what kind of nonsensical, evil judgment is this that Agent Fulford has come out with? He has lied about what happened in the courtroom. He's had no independence involved in examining the material proving that these officers were lying about the illegal directions from Recorder Sellers. Um, and of course, even before it goes to jury, Recorder Sellers made a no case to answer ruling that there was plenty of evidence to answer, and so forth, all of which should have been before Judge Fulford and examined in the context of the specific authorities under R.V. Howell and all the different authorities that make a citizen a police arrest for a breach of the peace lawful or unlawful, and then as I say, the extent of the legality of the body searches and the allegation of the sexual assault, further sexual assault, whilst I was being restrained after my arrest. Um, so and And this judge, as I stated at the beginning, has accused me of serial perjury. If I've lied under oath about what has happened at any stage in my arrest or in regards to the breach of the peace powers and so forth, then of course I've committed perjury and perverting justice in its own right. And of course, the judge doesn't explain why, if I've lied to him and lied under oath to the judge in particular, to the judge during trial, I haven't been investigated or pursued for perverting justice or perjury. And of course, when I read this, and this is just a fraction of the litany of evil lies and cover up, accusing me of being fanciful. Of course, the word fanciful is very closely aligned with the word fantasy. So he's effectively suggesting that I'm getting off, or I myself am getting some kind of satisfaction from inventing false allegations of being sexually assaulted by arresting officers whilst on film. Which he dismisses as untrue, again, without any examination of the actual film of the incident. So, what is it that this judge is so unbelievably biased, so egregiously and evilly accusing me of lying without even bothering to check the footage to verify for himself to what extent the footage shows my side of things or the side progressed by the recorder sellers and the CPS? And of course, the stink that came out of this judgment, even before I had access to an internet because I was in custody, I said, the moment I get out, I bet I'm going to dig up something disgusting about this judge, Adrian Fulford. And lo and behold, he is the judge who's connected to paedophile information exchange. The idea that this judge can sit in judgment on any case, much less one centered on sexual assaults, centered on homosexual assaults, because all these arresting officers were men, and I was complaining in particular of homosexual molestations and sexual assaults. Of course, why do I get a judge who is himself an advocate for the homosexualization or whatever however he views it of senior judges coming out of the closet if they're gay and banging on about it online when he's supposed to be independent and impartial and not be affiliated with any campaign groups of any description? Why when I'm complaining of being the victim of homosexual assault, among other things, do I get the one judge who is out, the one judge who campaigns online as in his capacity as a homosexual judge, and a judge, more importantly, who has a skeleton under the closet or two in the form of Tom O'Carroll, with whom he was closely associated and whose affiliate organization, when he was a campaigner in the 1970s, to be allied with, voluntarily allied and affiliated with an organization with the word paedophile in its very title. And of course, this brings me full circle to the likes of Breslin, because of course I can't get any newspaper, independent solicitor, any barristers who are prepared to take on cases just as a single issue representation. Nobody will touch me with a barge pole in terms of addressing the outrage that I was subjected to by the conviction without representation at Gloucester Crown Court in November 2021, and the poor victims of the evil scumbag Tom O'Carroll, with whom this judge was closely connected. And it goes, and this is how they operate. This is how there is no accountability, nothing but collusion from start to finish. Because bringing this documentary full circle, we return to Mariah Breslin, and of course, I'm pointing out nothing to do with my case, but just because I've come across the extent of how deep the state is in hock to and in collusion with corrupt judges like Adrian Fulford. Um, Not the slightest bit interested, rude, rebuffed, and of course, nobody therefore will know from Liverpool or wider afield, including the victims of the Southport attacks, will know that the judge they have sitting on their case has, without doubt, close personal connections to paedophile Tom O'Carroll, who was happy to campaign alongside him when he was head of his group, Paedophile Information Exchange, who claims to have no memory of this association other than the fact he was associated with a group called Paedophile Information Exchange, no in depth journalistic investigation to try and find out what more can be disclosed about Judge Fulford's connections. Um, and I mean, this report that I've just to finish off on that I've referred to, that's online and available to anybody, and of course I'll put a link down in the stuff below, in the information below. But look at the headline: Lord Justice Fulford backed paedophile campaign paper claims. Well, he either backed it or he didn't. It's not a claim. It's only a claim because the BBC don't wish to report it. What are the BBC? Well, we all know that they are a lefty crony organisation, a press who cover up and do everything and anything they are told to by the left-wing politicians and brackets, politicians slash bosses. At number 10 or wherever. It's a story that needs to be cleared up in any event and on any basis, because Judge Adrian Fulford obviously was carrying on sitting on the bench long after the story came to light in 2014. He sat on a child abuse case within a few months of having to apologise for these connections, and yet no interest in getting to the bottom of the story to what extent he did back paedophile information exchange. There must be paperwork. Tom O'Carroll himself could probably provide some information about the extent to which he liaised with Judge Fulford or Harriet Harman or any of the other senior figures who were in the campaign group that was affiliated with Pi. But we just got this tidbit of information. If the judge genuinely couldn't remember his details, his connections or the extent of his connections, other than he was connected to the organisation, and if the judge generally was, and there's no dispute the judge was connected to paedophile information exchange, but if he has a general memory and the common case of amnesia that always happens when you accuse a police officer or a CPS officer or a barrister or a journalist or a politician of having some disgusting seedy connections to paedophiles or whatever it happens to be, amnesia immediately sets in. So all the more reason to dig deeper, get more information, of which there must be plenty. But all we get is this story coming out in 2014, and that's the end of it. No more. Not only do we get no more information, but this judge is has been deemed a safe pair of hands by lefty activists, Yvette Cooper and and Prime Minister Keir Starmer. They have clearly appointed this man because of his paedophile connections, I would suggest, and because they know that all the corrupt journalists like Breslin and all the way through the whole system will also keep the vow of silence. They won't publish Adrian Fulford. They won't bring to the public's attention that probably Judge Adrian Fulford, I'm guessing, because I don't know all the ins and outs of all the other judges, but he's probably the most least qualified, the most least appropriate senior judge or senior official to sit on any kind of child abuse inquiry, because he has connections to a child abuser, because he campaigned to have children or was affiliated with a campaign group, which must amount to the same thing, with an organization that sought to legalize, legitimize the rape of children and the dissemination of images connected to that disgusting activity. This cannot stand, surely.